On a hot, crowded summer Sunday, Laurel and Hardy pull out of a line of cars into what some film historians believe is one of the funniest short comedies ever made. It was produced by Hal Roach in 1928. Its supervising director was Leo McCarey, who went on to win Academy Awards for The Awful Truth and Going My Way. Its photographer was George Stevens, who turned director himself and created Shane and Giant. Its title was Two Tars. Stan and Oliver, as sailors on shore leave, have taken up with fast women in slow traffic. We needn't say more, for like most great silent comedies, Two Tars speaks for itself.
Hello, and welcome to episode 22 of the Laurel and Hardy Blogcast. I'm Patrick Vasey, the author of the Laurel and Hardy blog, and also the forthcoming book, Laurel and Hardy Silence. Now, firstly, apologies if I sound a little odd, well, or at least a little more than usual. I've been a little unwell over the past few days.
I've got a cold in my nose.
I think I've had a bad case of ammonia, or possibly even double ammonia. I'm not really sure what it was.
You know, I know just what's the matter with you. You've got the sniffles.
Today on the show, we are celebrating the second anniversary of the podcast. Yes, the Laurel and Hardy Blogcast is 2 years old, and we'll be hearing some of your birthday messages in just a moment. But also on today's programme, we are blessed to be joined once again by our friendly neighbourhood expert, the brilliant Randy Skretvedt, as we take a deep dive into the next film on Stan and Ollie's journey, and that film is the wonderful Two Tars. So, before we jump into that, let's hear a few messages from our brilliant blogheads, but we start with Tracy Tolsman, who is the Grand Sheik of the Blockheads tent in Minnesota, and he is grinding away on his organ.
Hello?
Greetings, folks. This is Craig Coleman. I'm the author of 100 Years of Brodies with Hal Roach. I am calling you from Los Angeles, as someone say, Los Angeles. Right around the corner from 222 Fairview Avenue, as a matter of fact. And I want to congratulate Patrick and everyone associated with and interested in the Laurel and Hardy Blogcast. Congratulations on 2 years of fun and interesting observations. I was very honored to have been a guest on the 5th Blogcast back in August of 2020, and I eagerly await every new Blogcast, find fascinating information, hear interesting stories, and I want to say, keep it up, folks. Onwards and upwards. Bye-bye.
Hello, I'm Mike Jones, and on behalf of everybody at the Beauchamps Tent of Sunderland, I'd like to wish the Laurel and Hardy Blogcast a happy second university. Bye for now.
Well, here's another nice message you've gotten me into. This is Noah Diamond from the Marx Brothers Council podcast and other things, and I want to say happy anniversary to a very sophisticated 2-year-old, the Laurel and Hardy Blogcast. I love listening to you, Patrick, and your consistently dazzling guests. But I'm still waiting for you to cover some burning questions, like, were Stan and Ollie brothers in real life? Is it true that Hal Roach was really grease paint? And to what degree was Margaret Dumont just like her character in The Dancing Masters? I assume you'll get to all of this in the many years ahead, and I will be listening. So happy anniversary, happy birthday, and hats off to you.
Patrick, congratulations. It is year 2 of your podcast. That is amazing. Keep up the great work. I love your podcast. You have no shortage of fantastic guests to talk to, and you unearth some unexpected surprises every once in a while, which is so great. You think you know everything about Laurel and Hardy, and then you hear your podcast, and when you hear something new or think about a film a different way. It's just fantastic after all these years. So keep up the great work. I am Chris Johnson. You last heard me on episode 8 on Sugar Daddies. And I haven't talked to you since then. I had a little bout of hydrophosphates, but I'm better now. And anyway, even though we're talking about films from, 70, 80 years ago, I'd like to pose a challenge to all your listeners out there, and hopefully this will make you feel more closer connected to these films. Take your age, how old you are now, and subtract that from the year of your birth and find out what film, what Laurel and Hardy film that lands on, and that should make you feel like it's not so long ago. So for me, and I'll reveal my age doing this, if I subtract my age from the year I was born, that takes me right to 1938, right during Blockheads and Swiss Miss, but Blockheads is nice since that's where the name of your podcast came from. So all you listeners, try that out and see how you do. But I think you do have to be born before 1986 for that to work. But so if you're younger than that, sorry about that. You'll get there soon enough. All right, bye. Have a good one, Patrick. And all you listeners, thanks again for providing such a great service to all the Laurel and Hardy fans out there. Toot toot.
Toot toot. Toot toot.
Gents, thank you so much for sending me those messages. I can't tell you how much I enjoy hearing from you and having your voices on the blogcast too. It's lovely to hear from Christopher and Craig again, who both made appearances in our first year of podcasts, and also Mike Jones, who many of you I'm sure will know as he's such an active member of the Blogheads Facebook community as part of the Bo Chumps tent of the Sons of the Desert. And of course the wonderful Noah Diamond, who I am a huge admirer of, both with his work on the brilliant Marx Brothers Council podcast, but also his other projects besides. I was really thrilled to pick up that message, Noah, so thank you, and thank you one and all. And as well as the voice messages, some of you also chose to write in. And here are some of those messages I received. Congratulations on 2 great years. I really enjoy your podcasts while walking. Keep up the good work. That was from Dave Mathai, I think it's pronounced. Dear Patrick, congratulations on the 2nd anniversary of the Blogcast. Here is what I think makes this podcast amazing. If I watch a Laurel and Hardy movie at home alone, I will smile and giggle, but if I see the same film at a theatre with an audience, I will roll on the floor. The boys are just so much better when they're shared with fellow enthusiasts. Similarly, listening to an expert like yourself, I don't know about that, telling me about the boys is great, but listening in on your conversations with other great enthusiasts is so much more exciting. Your work brings my ears to great joy at such a high level with each episode. Thank you for getting me into another nice mess. And that was from Nick Jackson. Nick, thank you so much. That was a wonderful message to receive. Patrick, I discovered the podcasts early last year and have since heard every one a few twice. Your guests are very interesting and informative. Keep up the great work and can't wait for the next one. And that was from James Sheeline from Long Island, New York. Hi Patrick, a heartfelt congratulations on your 2-year anniversary. I have so loved your podcast and the Facebook community you've created. I've been a fan of the boys since I was 5, but I've rarely ever found anyone besides my dad to discuss my love of the boys. Until now. I've met so many nice people on the Blogheads page, especially Mike Beauchamps Sunderland and yourself. It warms my heart to think the boys' legacy is still alive and well, and this is before we even start mentioning your wonderful guests, foremost among them Messrs. Skretvedt and Ban. So put your shoulder to the wheel, grab the bull by the horn, and put your best foot forward in your 3rd year and more. Cheers! And that was from Chris Shear in Texas. Thank you, Chris. That was fabulous. And I've had so many lovely messages and comments on social media too. In fact, there was too many to read out here, but hopefully I've responded to you all online. I'd like to give you all a mention, of course I would, but as we're active on several social media platforms, it really would go on forever. I've just pulled a few names out at random, so thank you to Phyllis Frank, Nancy Custodio, Kurt Gardner, Michael Errett, Tony Butcher, Tom Papas, Mark Hammond, Greg Taylor, John Hayes, Bill Oates, Stephen Trodd, William Bailey, Penelope Carey and Mary Campbell. And again, that is just a few. Apologies if you sent a message or comment and I haven't mentioned you here. There were really too many of you to mention. but you are all very much appreciated and are a huge part of the Laurel and Hardy blog and the Blogheads community.
1,000 thanks.
So, to kick off today's episode, we're going to start with our audio blog for today's film and focus, which is Two Tars. It was filmed the 22nd of June to the 3rd of July 1928, and it was released on the 3rd of November 1928. It was produced by Hal Roach, directed by James Parrott, photographed by George Stevens, and titles by H.M. Walker. The main cast: Stan Laurel, Oliver Hardy, Thelma Hill, Ruby Blaine, Charlie Hall, Edgar Kennedy, and Harry Bernard. And we begin with a quote from Motion Picture News from the 8th of December 1928. There is some splendid elaboration on a simple idea in the new Hal Roach comedy co-featuring these lovable dubs, Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy. So well are the ideas in the Roach comedies carried out that it would well profit other comedy makers to study the method employed. Here, all the comedy revolves around a fight on the highway, and what a fight! Some of the gags are old and slapstick shows her face frequently, but the humour is presented with deft touch nevertheless. The fine teamwork of Stan and Oliver provoking considerable merriment. Stan achieves expressions of absolute vacuity, while Oliver exhibits a slyer type of fun and uses with good effect glances of embarrassment at the camera. These boys have a comedy style all of their own, and one that's hard to beat. Two Tars is fine comedy for audiences everywhere. However one might feel about Early to Bed, the experience gained by the Roach studio staff from making that picture must arguably have been one of learning. That Stan and Ollie's relationship was never tinkered with in this way again, and that the studio and Emmett Flynn, the film's director, immediately parted ways despite their new long-term contract, surely indicates dissatisfaction with the director and possibly with the finished picture. It can perhaps come as no surprise then that the boys' follow-up short, Two Tars, was a resounding return to form and formula. The ingredients that had ensured the success of all Laurel and Hardy pictures thus far had at its base our two main protagonists, shoulder to shoulder, together against the world. Add in a good heavy dose of reciprocal destruction, escalating into a carnival of mass carnage, and there was the perfect Laurel Hardy comedy recipe for the silent era. With an undeniable reinstatement of these elements, Leo McCarey, with the help of Stan Laurel and the Gagmen, came up with a story originally titled Two Tough Tars, that would become hailed by some as the best of Laurel and Hardy's silent shorts. But the praise didn't stop there. Others, including George Stevens, the renowned Hollywood director who worked as the boys' regular cameraman, described it as one of the funniest comedies of all time. Although the Two Tars that we know today runs for 2 reels, it appears to have been initially planned as a 3-reeler. The film's script includes an opening sequence that features the boys on a boat engaged in a spot of sea fishing. The scene revolves around Stan's ineptitude to catch anything, whilst Ollie can't help but succeed even when his line falls in the water without bait. Ultimately, the pen scene ends disastrously when the boat sinks. Now, there's no record that any of this was filmed, but existing still photos show discarded scenes with the boys at a shoeshine stand and with a capuchin monkey. The monkey, Josephine, was dressed in a matching sailor suit and appears in several delightful stills with the boys, but sadly no film footage exists. However, Josephine, owned by Roach employee and animal trainer Tony Campanaro, would make it onto the big screen with Harold Lloyd in The Kid Brother and Buster Keaton in The Cameraman, and she is also rumoured to appear with Charlie Chaplin in The Circus and be inside the Mickey Mouse costume in Babes in Toyland. Not a bad CV. In Two Tars, Stan and Ollie are sailors from the battleship Oregon, returning to the US from service in the Far East. On shore leave, the boys are out to have some fun. The gags begin thick and fast, with driver Stan almost crashing their hire car into a street lamp and the innocent pedestrian Sam Lofkin. Ollie berates him and takes the wheel to give Stan a demonstration of his exemplary driving. In faithful Laurel and Hardy fashion, this ends badly as Ollie immediately smashes the front of the car into the very next street lamp. The boys' reactions are fantastic, with Ollie glancing at us down the camera and Stan frowning in disapproval. The large glass dome sitting atop the streetlight then topples off and smashes into pieces over Ollie's head, much to Stan's amusement, and his wonderful smile beams widely. After fleeing the scene, the boys pull in at the roadside and attract the attention of a couple of ladies, Thelma and Ruby, who are struggling to operate a gumball machine outside a store. There follows some lovely childish flirting as the boys catch the eyes of the girls, played by Thelma Hill and Ruby Blaine. The embarrassed waves and smiles are hilarious in a very immature and pathetic sense, resembling children on a playground more than the romantic flirting of grown adults. It is, however, totally in character and perfect Laurel and Hardy humour. To show off their rugged manliness, the heroic sailors rush to the girls' aid and set to work on the gumball machine. After first getting his finger stuck in the contraption, Ollie gives it a vigorous shake, causing the glass to shatter and the gumballs to spill out all over the pavement. Stan and the girls jump into the car, leaving Ollie to stuff the now liberated gumballs down his shirt. Enter the annoyed shopkeeper, Charlie Hall. This is Hall's most notable appearance since playing the boys' grumpy landlord in Leave 'Em Laughing. Here in Two Tars, he cranks the surliness up a notch, and the little menace has some great bits of business, easily getting the upper hand over Ollie. The girls tell Stan to go to Ollie's aid, and Stan trots over to join the action, telling Charlie Hall, "You're flirting with death, son." Hall is unmoved, however, and punches Stan in the face. Stan slips over on the gumballs and repeatedly gets to his feet, takes swing after swing at the shopkeeper, but continues to slip on the rolling candy. The girls can't take any more embarrassment, so they wade in to sort out the altercation themselves. Ruby rolls up her sleeves, orders the boys back in the car, and physically roughs up Charlie Hall. This physicality came naturally to Ruby Blaine, who certainly knew how to handle herself, having reputedly been a professional wrestler and an actress in comedies and westerns. The newly acquainted foursome drive off, leaving a dishevelled Charlie to his smashed gumball machine, a broken table, and his shopfront littered with candy. These opening sequences make up less than half the total length of the picture, as their main purpose is to set up the traditional grand finale. As mentioned earlier, Two Tars reverted to a tried and tested formula, and as such the climax was one of wanton and mass destruction. On this occasion, the gags were derived from the assault of vehicles rather than people. Two Tars' scene of carnage takes place on a country road, where at the day's end the newly acquainted revellers are stopped in their tracks by a massive traffic jam. Not content to sit patiently at the back of the queue, and egged on by his fellow passengers, Ollie steers onto the opposite side of the road and drives past the standing vehicles. This action inspires several other motorists to follow suit, and there is very soon 2 lanes of stationary traffic. Most of the cars used for the traffic jam belong to Roach Studio staff, who'd been asked to bring their vehicles in to make up the numbers. In addition, 10 more cars were explicitly purchased to be damaged and destroyed as part of the story. Edgar Kennedy, sporting an uncharacteristic moustache, is in the car directly behind the boys and accidentally shunts our hero's car in the back. Not to be shown up in front of the ladies, Ollie returns the gesture and reverses into Kennedy's radiator grille. This goes on backwards and forwards until more and more motorists start getting involved. Fruit starts being thrown, hitting people other than the intended targets and thus dragging them into the fray. Headlamps are ripped off, windscreens smashed, tyres punctured. The list is endless, and this is hilarious stuff. The genius in these scenes is that time is afforded to every confrontation. With over half the film dedicated to this tit-for-tat reciprocal destruction, it doesn't need to be rushed. Every attack can be savoured, and every assault avenged with gusto. Each assault is considered and bespoke to the victim. Sometimes it's intended and sometimes accidental, but the recipient is drawn into the melee either way. Worthy of note here is that director James Parrott and his assistant Lloyd French carried out their directorial duties on horseback during these scenes. The pair galloped backwards and forwards along the lines of cars directing the action. This fascinating bit of production trivia was not only reported in the Exhibitor's Daily Review, 6th of July, 1928, quote, "Director James Parrott handles his crowd via horseback," but also confirmed by one of the supporting players in conversation with author Randy Skretvedt. Thomas Benton Roberts was a prop man on the lot and responsible for much of the construction on the various Roach sets, including the breakaway cars used in Two Tars. He appeared in the picture as a tomato-throwing motorist and has a particularly juicy one rubbed around his face by Stan. During Roberts' interview, he revealed how Stan was in complete control of the film's direction, stating that James Parrott and Lloyd French, quote, just did what Stan said. Jimmy Parrott knew what Stan wanted, and he just called for the camera to roll or cut. Conversely, his description of Babe's involvement couldn't have been more different, saying, quote, Babe didn't contribute much. In giving him an idea of what to do, he might come back and ask, how do you want it played up? Or something like that. That's all. As well as Two Tars being the film debut for Thomas Benton Roberts, it was also the first Laurel and Hardy film in which Harry Bernard and Stan's good friend and future Laurel Hardy director, Charles Rogers, appeared. Both gentlemen would appear in more comedies with the boys and become popular members of the Laurel and Hardy stock company. Eventually, the destruction ends as a motorcycle cop appears and demands to know who started it all. About 100 or so fingers point to Stan and Ollie, now sitting angelically back in their car. The boys are made to wait while the policeman clears the traffic jam. Each wrecked car slowly makes its way past the boys, who are chastised and waiting for their final punishment. However, as the boys see the procession of mangled vehicles coming past them, they can't help but giggle with delight like naughty schoolboys until the cop looks over at them and the laughter immediately stops. Eventually, the giggles become uncontrollable, which is the last straw for the cop. The boys drive away, but the cop cannot give chase because his motorcycle has been crushed under a truck. Several motorists, however, do pursue the boys, which leads to them all racing into a railway tunnel. Seconds later, we see the cars reversing out ahead of a huge steam locomotive. And our final image of Stan and Ollie is in their Model T, which has been squashed wafer thin by the passing locomotive, gingerly making their way out of the tunnel. Fade to black. Given how successful and popular Two Tars was and remains to this day, the decision to revert to the proven Laurel Hardy formula is seemingly beyond reproach. But as this was the latest of many pictures employing the same finale device, one enlightened theatre operator, Stacey Osgood, from Kenwood Theatre, Chicago, Illinois, reviewing the picture in Exhibitor's Herald World, 9th of March 1929, stated, quote, Metro's comedies are good at present. They have a capital staff of gagmen that is proceeding on a system or theory that gets every possible laugh. But the lack of variety is going to kill their comedies, slow but sure. Good-looking girls and photography make them Class A. But what are they going to do when the folks get as tired of their construction as they did of the old Mack Sennett's and our gangs? End quote. Indeed, agreeing with this view almost a century later, notable expert and commentator Randy Skretvedt described the boys' big endings as having been done to death by this point in their partnership. A bit of trivia worthy of mention and related to Two Tars' ending is that the censors deemed one of the picture's destructive gags unsuitable for a particular locality. A letter dated 2nd of August 1928 to Mr. W. D. Kelly, a censor at MGM, stated, quote, Your picture, Two Tars, has been reviewed. The following elimination has been ordered. Reel 2, eliminate view where man deliberately cuts auto tire with a knife. The reason for the above elimination is that it will tend to incite crime. If you will write us a letter advising us that the above elimination will be made in all prints to be shown in New York State, it will not be necessary to return the print for rescreening. End quote. Moviegoers in New York State must have been an impressionable bunch. Despite the concern over slashed tyres and, more significantly, the ongoing repetition of picture construction, Two Tars was still received with much delight. Following its theatrical release, it was considered by many to be one of Laurel and Hardy's funniest comedies yet, as the following reviews will state. Stan Laurel and Ol Hardy, the greatest of all comedians of the time, will also be presented on the programme with Alibi, giving additional entertainment value to capital patrons. These masters of fun are to be offered in Two Tars, and funny as have been some of their successes of the past, this is the zenith of their combined efforts to date. That was from the Shamokin News Dispatch from the 8th of July 28. Stan and Oliver, Laurel and Hardy, in one of the funniest comedies in a couple of ages. The gags are great and the laughs mount until practically continuous. Worth booking anywhere. Be sure to get it, it'll knock your crowd stiff. That was in the Film Daily, 12th of August, 1928. Next up from the Joplin Globe, 7th of October, 28. The fourth element, comedy, is furnished to the highest degree by those popular comedians Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy in Tootars. It concerns the adventures of two tough gobs and has been acclaimed by the press as the funniest two-reel comedy ever produced. From the manager of the Central Theatre, Selkirk, Manitoba, "Boy oh boy, what a comedy! I thought this pair couldn't make him any better than they have been doing, but this is just about the best yet. Play it!" And then from the manager of the Screenland Theatre, Nevada, "The best comedy we have had for weeks. How they did laugh. And the photography was more like we used to get in Roach comedies, except part of the first reel, which was a little dark. Good print, and oh lad, what a laugh, what a laugh." Tootars remains well respected by critics, commentators and fans alike. Film historian Glenn Mitchell summarised it excellently. Quote, "The civilised exchange of violence is a motif recurrent in their films, but seldom executed with the skill, variety and careful construction demonstrated here. Some consider it their greatest work." End quote. Historian and author William K. Everson waxed even more lyrical about the picture. Quote, "Next to Big Business, which is better only because it is simpler, Tootars is about the funniest and most representative of all Laurel and Hardy silence." End quote. Equally complimentary, John McCabe, the team's groundbreaking biographer, heaped even more praise onto the comedy. Quote, "Tootars has peers among short film comedies. It is not likely to have a superior." End quote. Controversial biographer Fred Lawrence Giles makes an even more fascinating point about Tootars, which raises the film's status even higher in the canon. He identified this picture as the precise moment when Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy became superstars, saying that with this picture, quote, "they had moved without fanfare into the ranks of Chaplin, Lloyd, Langdon and Keaton." End quote. This is praise indeed. Stan and Babe had gone from being jobbing actors jostling for position in an incredibly competitive industry to being labelled the greatest of all comedians of the time, and their latest picture as the funniest two-reel comedy ever produced. Hal Roach now had what he wanted: respect. Undeniable respect of his comedies and respect for his studio. Comedy was a serious business to Roach and everyone who worked for him. As his comedy empire grew, he sought to strengthen his relationship with MGM, particularly on the East Coast, where Nick Skenk, the head of MGM, and Fred Quimby, Roach's liaison with the distributor, was based. Roach himself, or sometimes one of his vice presidents, would make frequent business trips to New York to meet with MGM executives over various matters. It became so frequent that Roach opened a New York office, as the following report in the Film Daily, 15th of June 1928, just 7 days before the start of filming Tootars, stated. Quote, "With Mrs. Helen Harris Jones in charge as Eastern representative, Hal Roach has opened New York offices in the Lowe State Building. Benjamin W. Shipman, vice president of the company who was on a visit to New York, supervised inauguration of the new office." End quote. Shipman, who would later become Laurel and Hardy's attorney, was in New York on important business. He'd been assigned to investigate the various possibilities and potential of sound recording equipment for Roach's pictures. Ever since the release of Al Jolson's The Jazz Singer in October 1927, the public's hunger for more and more films with sound had been growing, and Roach couldn't afford to ignore it any longer. The industry was changing, and Hal Roach was not going to be left behind. The question was, how would his studio adopt and adapt to these new demands? These questions were soon answered. Quote, "Roach will only use sound effects. Hal Roach is planning first to use only sound effects and musical synchronization as illumination for the fun in his comedies. For the present, he will not introduce dialogue and patter. This much was revealed at a dinner given by Roach last week to 35 players, directors, executives and department heads to discuss plans for synchronization of Roach MGM comedies. The dinner followed the return of Benjamin W. Shipman, studio business manager, who thoroughly investigated all angles of sound devices. Others besides Roach and Shipman who addressed the diners were Warren Doan, general manager, H.M. Walker, vice president, and Leo McCary, supervising director and vice president of the Hal Roach Studios, Incorporated. That was in Motion Picture News on the 30th of June, 1928. Following their investigations, Hal Roach secured a 15-year license to produce sound pictures under Western Electric patents. The decision was made. They would begin their journey to the talkies by initially dipping their toes in the world of sound technology. Synchronized music and sound effects were the chosen way forward, and it began immediately. And now we have an even better reason to celebrate. Yes, it's the welcome return of the man I affectionately like to call Randy Skretvedt. It's Randy Skretvedt. He today joining us on the Blogcast for his 7th episode is the world-renowned expert and author of the wonderful Laurel and Hardy, The Magic Behind the Movies, and the Laurel and Hardy Movie Scripts Volume 1, is the incomparable Randy Skretvedt. Randy, welcome back to the Laurel and Hardy Blogcast.
Thank you, Patrick. It's wonderful, as always, to be here, and I hope I say something intelligible.
You always do.
Well,
I know you're joining us, Randy. This is, as I said, this is the 7th episode that you will have been on now. But also, this is a special one for us because this is our 2nd anniversary episode on the Blogcast.
Oh,
2 years. So it's our 2nd birthday. And I do remember that you actually joined us on the 1st anniversary episode when we chatted about Battle of the Century. So this is becoming a bit of a tradition now.
Well, now that I have a script for Battle of the Century, I could tell you a lot more about it than I did back then, but maybe we'll have to do a second one. But, well, happy university, and let's go to Fu Young's and get some sukiyaki for our university.
That's brilliant. So if you could keep next April clear as well, we've now set a bit of a tradition, so we'll carry
good
on.
Lord willing, if we're all still here and we haven't all been blown up, well, then I'll be here.
Well, you're going to have to, because we've got to get to Atoll K, and that's going to take me ages.
Okay. All right. I actually rather like Atoll K, so it's the only post-Roach film that I have watched several times because I enjoy it.
Yes, that's nice.
I can't say that about any of the others, but Atoll K I rather like. Do
you have to squint? Do you have to squint when you watch it? Blur your eyes.
No. I have a very good. In fact, I just got a working region-free player, so I can now watch the BFI.
Oh yes,
Blu-ray,
that's a much better. Yes, that's perfect.
I also have the Gaumont one that has all of the French actors speaking in their actual voices and only Laurel and Hardy dubbed.
Oh, okay.
Which is interesting to hear after hearing the dubbed into English version all the time. It's interesting to hear the real voices of the other actors, and the people who are dubbing for Laurel and Hardy sound nothing at all like them.
Nothing. That's great. So how are you, Randy? And what have you been up to since we last spoke?
I'm doing very well. Last weekend, I spent hosting a Laurel and Hardy silent festival at the Old Town Music Hall in El Segundo, California. And so for any of your listeners who might be in that area of the Los Angeles region, that's a wonderful place to go to. It has a Wurlitzer pipe organ, a theater organ, and it's a perfect venue for silent films. And so I hope we will be doing more silent comedy and silent Laurel and Hardy programs in the future. But it was very well attended. I did 3 shows, all of which were very, very well attended. Wow. And it's wonderful to finally see people back in a movie theater, a full crowd laughing uproariously at, we showed Bacon Grabbers, That's My Wife, and what was the other one? We did a third one. Well, anyway, Liberty.
Oh,
Liberty.
Yeah.
So I wanted to avoid the ones that have the reciprocal destruction at the end, because there were so many of those. I could have done Should Married Men Go Home, You're Darn Tootin', and Battle of the Century. Yeah. But as you note in your written piece about Two Tars, it was becoming a bit too much of a standard device. Yeah. And I'm glad they didn't rely on it further. There are, of course, other Laurel and Hardy silent comedies which don't use it, but there are so many which do.
Yes, it was becoming a bit of a formula for them, wasn't it? I think it was it was right time to sort of break away from that.
So I did that, and then I'm still working on Volume 2 of the Laurel and Hardy movie scripts. And as it turns out, one of the most recent acquisitions, thanks to our friend Peter Mikkelsen in Copenhagen, or as we in America say, Copenhagen, he sent me a scan of the original script for Two Tars, which I had not seen. That was one of the 3 that I had never seen in 40 years. Two Tars and The Music Box and Big Business. Now, Big Business I still have not seen. but I now own a copy of the script for Music Box, which I think I showed you last time.
Yeah.
And now I have a scan of 2 tars, so those will both be included in Volume 2. So
fantastic.
And I will read it to you if you wish. I'll read to you the unused first section of 2 tars, which is rather unusual, which I don't think was ever filmed.
Yes, please.
But you'll have it from the script.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, I guess that's a good place to start. I mean, is that part that you're referring to a potentially first reel? Because it was a 2-reeler, but there was some talk of it being a 3-reeler, and the trade papers.
Yeah, Benton Roberts always said it was a 3-reeler. Really, it's a long 2-reeler. It runs about 22 minutes.
Right.
But now, when I got my Super 8 print as a child from Blackhawk Films, there was a 400-foot reel, and then there was 200 feet on the top reel. So they divided it as if it were a 3-reeler.
Right.
And I suppose the thing to look at would be cue marks. Those are always being obliterated now in digital cleanup, unfortunately. But originally, there would be on a print, there would be at the top right corner about 5 seconds before you had to do a changeover from one projector to the other in the theater. There's a little black dot that is on for 3 frames, and then 5 seconds later, that's the get ready one, and then 5 seconds later, there's another one that means change over. Right. And those of us who were movie projector geek kids, we would always look back behind us to see the changeover in the windows in the movie theater. I went from left to right. Very good. That's cool. That doesn't happen anymore, but it was fun way back when in the days of old technology. But I think it really is just a lengthy 2-reeler. But like I said, we do have stills of them with Josephine, the Capuchin monkey, whom we know from The Cameraman with Buster Keaton, and as I mentioned, Tony Campanaro, who was the man who trained the animals for the Hal Roach Studios. Prior to his affiliation with the studio, had actually been an organ grinder, and had one of those little musical hand crank things that makes the cute barrel organ music. And they always have a little trained monkey who goes around and gets the money from the patrons. Well, that was Josephine. And so they were working together before they jointly got into the motion picture business. And I don't know how old Josephine was, but evidently those monkeys, that breed, will live quite a long time. There's also a lot of these stills that involve a shoe shine.
Yes.
And there's a sign on the side of the shoe shine stand that says, "Try it now, Climax Plug." I've had a lot of people ask me what a Climax Plug is. It sounds rather salacious, actually.
It sounds pretty good.
But it's really the grand old chew. It was a plug of chewing tobacco.
Oh, that's not good enough.
Which you want to stay away from. But evidently, a lot of people were still chewing that back in the 20s. So That's what that refers to. There's also one I just noticed here. Get it, Magnus Root Beer. It's fine in the stein. Right there. I had not noticed that before. There it is. Magnus Root Beer. That's the great thing about 8x10s. You notice all sorts of odd little things like that which flash by in the movie.
Yes. I noticed there are some stills in front of Charlie Hall's shop with the gumball machine, and I don't know if you noticed the very next shop to it is French's School of Dramatic Arts.
Yes, yeah.
Which I'm guessing is Lloyd French.
That also shows up in Liberty. I was noticing it in Liberty, the part that has the elevator where they're hiding behind the elevator, and the top is there.
Yeah.
If you look at the top right corner, it says French's School of Dramatic Arts, which could refer to either Lloyd French, who was assistant director on most of the Laurel and Hardys up through 1933 when he finally got promoted to director. His father was Louis Alver French, who was, I think, the chief accountant for the Roach Studios. And Roach met him when Roach was a truck driver. He worked for a trucking company, and Louis Alver French was the accountant for the trucking company. Right. And he was evidently scrupulously honest. And Roach said, if I ever get my own company, I'm going to hire you as an accountant. Well, sure enough, Mr. Roach was true to his word, and Louis Alver French became Roach's accountant, and his son got into the movies as an assistant director and later on a director. So that's how those connections happened.
So the two Frenches were actually were related then?
Father and son. Louis is father and Lloyd is son. Yeah, Lloyd did not live very long. He only lived to be 50 years old. And his last movie credit is 1943, and evidently had some sort of heart ailment, which claimed him at a young age. So, but he made, after he left Roaches in late 33, I think, he went to Vitaphone, and he directed a lot of Vitaphone shorts there, many of which star Shemp Howard, later of Three Stooges fame. So he did have a fairly prolific directing career, even though he did not live all that long.
What did he die of?
I think he died of a Tuesday. Or was it Wednesday? Do you remember?
So the script, Randy, can you just give us a little bit of a burst of the missing bits that we've never seen? That would be quite interesting.
Well, it's not that lengthy. I'll read it to you so that I won't make any mistakes or assumptions. I'll just read it as written.
Okay, I'll close my eyes and try and picture it.
Yeah, most of what we know in the film is in the script, although there are some gags in the script which are not in the film. There was one that was supposed to involve a truck that had a load of pigeons, and that was supposed to, the crate was supposed to be upended, and all these pigeons were supposed to fly everywhere. So that's a gag that you don't find in the film. And there are several gags in the film which were not in the script, and evidently Benton Roberts said he remembered going to a preview. A lot of the Roach Gang would go to these sneak previews that they would have in Glendale or Pomona or somewhere fairly removed from the movie colony, where it would just be average people attending. They'd throw it on as a sneak preview.
Right.
And of course, everybody had their little clicker machine. If you pressed a button on it, a number would increase by one number. And then they would all go have dinner afterwards, and everybody would show how many laughs they had counted with the clicker, and they'd average them off, and they'd see they wanted to get 60 of them for a two-reeler. That was the goal, was 60 laughs for a two-reeler.
Right.
And Benton Roberts remembered Stan saying, "Hey, get your clothes back on and come back out to the location tomorrow, because we're going to do some new scenes." So they added scenes, including the Benton Roberts scene with the tomato.
Yeah.
He's the guy who throws the tomato at Harry Bernard, the truck driver.
Yes.
They added that after an initial preview, and that is not in the script. There's several gags in the film that aren't in the script, so I suspect that those if I go through the film, I can go, that's not in the script, that's not in the script, and I can find out what was added after the initial preview. But anyway, here is the first unused scene, and it takes up exactly one page. So here it is. Open on, this is just, and it's not too, it just says L13 Laurel Hardy. Open on title, The Navy. Cut to stock shot of the fleet arriving. Cut to title to the effect, after 9 months at sea, the boys arrived in port, ocean weary and glad to get ashore. Fade in on Stan and Babe in a rowboat in the middle of the ocean. Babe looks at Stan disgustedly and speaks title, so this is your idea of a good time. Stan just looks dumb, kind of half surprised at Babe's attitude. Stan already has his fishing line in the water. Babe picks up his pole, puts some bait on the hook, and throws it out. His line no sooner hits the water when he gets a bite and pulls in a big mackerel. Babe doesn't show any enthusiasm at all. He takes the fish off, throws out his line again, and it no sooner hits the water when he gets another fish. Repeat the same business. Stan still with his line in the water and not a sign of a bite. Babe throws his line out again. Stan pulls his line out and throws it over near Babe's. Babe moves his pole away, and Stan gets over. He wants to sit where Babe was sitting. Babe says, all right then, anything to satisfy you. They exchange places, the boat wobbling about. Babe puts his line where Stan's was, gets another bite, and pulls in another big fish. Stan is still waiting, full of expectancy. Babe catches another one. Stan then gets over, he wants to change poles. Babe does so, and no sooner takes Stan's pole than he gets a bite on that one and pulls in another fish. Stan by this time is getting mad. He takes his pole from Babe again, throws the line into the water, and still no bite. Babe pulls up another mackerel with that pole and takes it off. All the while, Babe is doing his business in a half-peeved attitude, not a bit thrilled at catching fish. Stan would give his left eye if he only had a nibble. Finally, Stan asks Babe to give him his bait. Babe does so, and as Stan is putting it on the hook, Babe's line accidentally falls into the water without any bait. He gets a bite and pulls in another big fish. Stan throws his line into the water and gets a big bite at the same time Babe's pole bends. They both pull up and the lines are tangled. Stan is all excited. There's a big mackerel on the line. He tries to get the fish off, and Babe says, "Wait a minute, I'll do it." He gets hold of the two lines to unravel them. The fish spins around, and when the lines are separated, we see that the fish is on Babe's hook. Stan's hat falls off, and as he walks to the back of the boat to get it, the boat sinks. Fade out. Well, that's a rather curious sequence. It doesn't have that much of a finish. And really, you would think that it would be funnier if the roles were reversed.
Yes.
If Stan were getting all the fish and Ollie. I mean, that seems more in keeping with what we would normally find, because it's usually Stan can do the finger wiggle and can do earsy, kneesy, nosy, and can do the peewee and all these things that frustrate Ollie because he can't do them. So, but of course, this is a very early short still, and they're still finding their way. And just as I said earlier that I think Early to Bed would have been funnier if Stan had gotten the inheritance instead of Ollie, I think the same thing pertains here, that because Ollie always has this self-importance and me first attitude, I think it would have been funnier to have that deflated by Stan catching all these fish with no effort whatsoever.
Yes, yeah.
But as I say, I don't think that was, I've never seen any stills that suggest that was filmed. But if you do find a picture of them in sailor suits in a boat in the middle of the ocean, well, now you'll know what it was from.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So
I was thinking exactly the same thing. I think if that had been a few years down the line, that would have definitely been reversed, wouldn't it? The roles would have been reversed, because it's like Stan's white magic. And you could just imagine Stan being totally nonplussed and yanking the fish out while Babe's going up.
Yeah,
that would have worked.
And Ollie doing exasperating close-ups.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
brilliant.
I mean, it's similar to Stan's, striking his thumb as a match, or having the pipe, or having the glass of ice water in his pocket. So it's that sort of thing.
Yeah. It's nice to see, though, that this is, again, it's signs of they still haven't quite decided where they're going with the characters. They're still developing them, even at that point.
That's what makes the scripts interesting, is all the little detours they took before they found what worked, and many times the roads not taken are pretty funny. Yeah. There was a very lengthy sequence for County Hospital at the end of it, where they had this long chase sequence. Also, Toad in a Hole had long chase sequences with the Model T, which aren't in the film, and probably not for budget reasons. You can do all sorts of fantastic things when it's just you and a typewriter.
Yeah, that's true.
But when the budget department gets a hold of the script and they realize it's going to take location shooting and a lot of extras and a lot of props, maybe you should think of something else.
Yes, that's probably why they went for that horrible backdrop screen for the county hospitals. That was awful.
Yeah. Evidently, Mr. Roach told Richard Bann that since they knew it was going to be fake, they tried to make it as fakey as possible.
Oh, did they really?
And get the laugh that way. Which, if you've ever seen the W.C. Fields short, The Fatal Glass of Beer, have you ever seen that, where he's up in the Yukon? No. Well, it's a very funny and very bizarre short. Also very funny for Richard Kramer, who was marvelously funny in it, intentionally. There's a scene where Fields says, "I'm going to go out and milk the elk," and they go to this terrible stock footage that's all out of proportion of these moose and elk behind Fields, and he's looking, and one moose in the stock shot appears to look at Fields, and he says, "Elmer, have you seen Lena?" And they're getting laughs out of the phoniness of the rear projection, right? And I think that's what they were aiming for with County Hospital, but I don't know if it quite comes off.
Not quite. No, not quite. Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame.
It's a great short until that sequence, though.
Oh, it is. Oh, yeah, absolutely right. Well, we can forgive it even for that as well. And also, I just wanted to mention as well, I really, the chapter in your book about Two Tars is fascinating because of all the first-hand accounts you've got from Thomas Benton Roberts, and the bit about James Parrott and Lloyd French riding horseback along the rows of cars directing. That was just, where are the photos for that? That should have been recorded somewhere. Come on.
Well, there is one that has shown up a few times.
Really?
Here. Have you seen this one?
Yes, I've seen that one. Yeah, I've seen that one.
Well, you can see there's Mr. Parrott has has his jodhpurs on there and his riding breeches, and I believe this hat and glasses are the ones that Thomas Benton Roberts uses in his tomato. I know he told me he borrowed Jimmy Parrott's sunglasses.
Yes.
And I'm not sure if the hat is the same.
It looks the same. It definitely looks the same.
But there's that man right there is Roy Seawright.
Oh, okay.
Who I think was bald even then, and I think this gentleman here is Charlie Olsey, Oelze, who did a lot of props for the Our Gang comedies. He did all the very outlandish things that the kids were supposed to have built.
Right.
But I'm pretty sure he worked on this one as well.
Yeah.
And there's Sam Luft. This is a great still because you see a lot of the cast and crew and all those extras out in the hot sun getting their box lunch. And they were $5 a day extras, so that was a big expense. And what else? They've determined where the location is. If you look at the there's a fellow named Chris Bungo, Bungo.
Yes, I know Chris Bungo.
You might want to have him on your podcast. Because he has determined many locations, and he's put together these fascinating then and now videos on YouTube. And he determined where the filming took place. Thomas Benton Roberts thought it was on Centinela Avenue, which is on one side of what is now the Santa Monica Airport. Well, actually, it turns out it's the other side, which aligns with the topography that you see in the film. So it's actually on 23rd Street in Santa Monica. And the area where they encounter the cement mixer blocking the street is on 23rd Street near Marine Street. There's a little off the road there, and then the part where the four people are bouncing along in their car with their heads poking through the convertible top canvas is on 23rd Street near Pier Avenue. And then the final gag with the train was on the west side of what is called the McClure Tunnel near the intersection of Colorado and Ocean Avenues in Santa Monica. So now you know where those locations are. Now, also, the scene with Charlie Hall in the drugstore, that appears to have been shot in two locations. I'm pretty sure that the actual drugstore is on the back lot, especially since it has the French School of Academy, the Academy of Dramatic Art. So that has to be the back lot of the Roach studio. But the reaction shots of Laurel and Hardy in the car looking on, that's shot in downtown Culver City. And so that's at 38 across the street from 3804 through 3844 Bagley Avenue in Culver City. Now, Bagley Avenue is just a part of Main Street. It's very strange. Culver City has the shortest Main Street in America. And you're going down Main Street, and then all of a sudden, you're still going straight on that street, but it changes names to Bagley Avenue. Right, okay. Now, why that is, I don't know. There's some sort of demarcation point there, but you're on the very same street, but it changes names. And then right next to it is the intersection of Bagley and Venice, and that's where they did the big scene at the end of Hats Off. If you look at it, and if you take stills from that sequence and you look, the buildings that are on the corners are still there and still immediately recognizable. And one of those streets, it's on Venice going west and then turning north onto Bagley, on the corner there, you can see that in Bacon Grabbers. There's the bit where Ollie asks Stan where Kennedy's house is, and Stan points in one direction, and Ollie, knowing how reliable Stan is in giving directions, makes a sharp turn the other way. Yeah. And then they cut to the Model T going around the corner. Well, when they do that turn, that intersection is Venice going on to Bagley, and that corner building is still there. It's now a tourist attraction called the Museum of Jurassic Technology. Okay. meaning old gadgets we don't use anymore. Oh, right, okay. And it's actually quite fascinating and fun. Yeah. So very good. Look it up. The Museum of Jurassic Technology.
Well, I hope they're giving you some commission, because that's a good plug.
So that's the biggest surprise of the script is this fishing sequence. Yeah. Essentially, the movie starts at what is in the script paragraph number 10. And it just says, fade in on Stan and Babe coming along the road in a Ford Roadster. Hanging on the door is a sign for rent. Stan is driving. Babe, with a very pleased expression, is talking to Stan and gets over title, "This is what you should have done in the first place." Stan turns to nod to him, and they run into a lamppost. Babe looks disgusted, tells Stan to move over, and he will take the wheel. Babe backs the car away. No damage has been done to it, and they start off again. Well, see right there in the film, they added Sam Lufkin in the white suit as a pedestrian almost hit when they hit the lamppost.
That's right.
That's Sam Lufkin number 1, because there are 2 Sam Lufkins for the price of 1 in 2 tars, because he is the man, the clean-shaven man in the light suit at the beginning who almost gets hit, and then he is the man whose car is behind Edgar Kennedy's. And he has a mustache and a bowler and a dark suit.
Mustache, that's why I didn't recognize him. Okay. Same
actor twice. And if you go to the magnificent website of Dave Lord Heath, the Another Nice Mess website, as I did a couple of days ago, you will stumble upon all manner of fascinating information about the youth of Sam Lufkin, which I had never seen before.
Okay.
He evidently got into trouble with the law as a teenager and spent 3 or 4 years in reform school.
Oh, wow.
So
I see. Shady character. I love it.
Or as Mickey Daniels says in the Our Gang short Fish Hooky, reform school. I don't know if the Brits are familiar with the Little Rascals or Our Gang.
Not so, well, me personally, not so much. It's like the Stooges as well, and Abbott and Costello. They just totally passed me by. But yeah, Our Gang. I've not really spent much time with Our Gang at all.
Well, the early 30s talkie shorts are, at least in my estimation, quite good, and they're certainly, after Laurel and Hardy, the best series that Roach made.
Right.
Unfortunately, I look at a lot of the Charlie Chase and Thelma Todd and Zasu Pitts and Boyfriends and Taxi Boys, and you just kind of go, well, I like the music, I like the supporting actors, but gee, I wish this were funnier. There's something missing in those, and I think it points up to, for all the talent at the Roach lot, you really needed somebody behind a series who was a guiding light besides Hal Roach for all of his talent, and you had that in Stan Laurel for Laurel and Hardy, and you had it in Robert McGowan for the Our Gang series. And Charlie Chase is wonderful when he's good, but you go through 2 or 3 that are not so good before you get to a good one. So he's very, very hit and miss, unfortunately, at least in the sound era. The silents are a little more consistently better. So
yeah, I've always liked whatever Charlie Chase I've seen, and I think most of those have been silence. But I quite like Charlie Chase. Limousine Love was quite interesting. That was a nice one.
That's a good one, yeah. And Bromo and Juliet, which has Babe prominently, is a good one.
Oh, okay.
I think the best talkie is the Pip from Pittsburgh,
right?
Which is that's a wonderful short, and I wish they were all as good as that one.
Yeah.
They always call Charlie Chase the master of the comedy of embarrassment, and I don't think that's quite right. I think the idea, at least in the sound era, is you get this guy who looks seemingly normal and you put him into the most fantastic, implausible situations possible.
Yeah.
And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes they're too implausible.
Yeah.
And, Oliver Hardy and Stan Laurel both said independently to John McCabe, they said that they always tried to be real. They always tried to ground the storylines in something that was plausible and real. And if you're familiar with the television show I Love Lucy, I don't know if you know that, but that was always their idea too, was the first act had better be something that people can relate to and that's real. And that way, once you've done that, you can go to town in the second act and be wild and crazy and do all sorts of fantastic things, as long as it's first grounded in something that's plausible. And Charlie Chase doesn't always follow that rule, unfortunately. But Laurel and Hardy do. Laurel and Hardy, and for all of Hal Roach's griping about Stan Laurel not being good in story construction, I'm sorry, but the Laurel and Hardy films have more consistently good story construction than virtually anything else at Roach's. They always have a good finish. And with once in a while, there's one like Their First Mistake, which doesn't really finish, but which did in the script. They really should have retained what they had in the script. They probably cut it for length reasons. I don't know. Anyway, usually there's a satisfying wrap up that puts a little bow ribbon on the end of the film.
Yeah, Habeas Corpus is another one. That it just falls into that puddle at the end, and you're thinking, well, what's happening?
Yeah.
What happens now?
Yeah. And a lot of times, I think even the script for Battle of the Century, which I was just looking at, just says, "We go for a wow finish." They were assuming that this inspiration would strike while they were filming.
That's it.
The poor scriptwriter can't think of a thing. And he's got a golf date at noon. So he just says, "We go for a wow finish." Okay, guys, I'm off to the golf course now.
That's the script done. Love it.
Yeah. Yep. So, but Two Tars does, in fact, let me read it since I have it right here. Thanks again, Peter Mickelson. Here we go. This is section or paragraph number 58. Cut to follow shot shooting directly at Stan and Babe in the Roadster. They come to a turn in the road and several cars are coming toward them. The drivers look forward, see what is coming, and all scatter for safety, running off into fields, ditches, or anything to get out of the way. Follow Stan and Babe into an open field followed by the other cars. They chase across the field and down over a hill, disappearing from sight. Pick them up at the entrance of a tunnel. The Roadster dashes in. Cut to other end of tunnel and show a locomotive approaching. Cut back to the other end and show the 15 or 20 cars trying to crowd into the tunnel. Stay with this setup and we see all the cars quickly skirmish out of the tunnel backwards as if they had seen the approaching train. They just clear the tracks as the train passes through. Now this is paragraph number 61, the last paragraph. Cut to the other end of the tunnel and we see Stan and Babe come through in their Roadster, but it has been squashed almost flat, giving the impression that it has gotten by between the wall of the tunnel and the train. They approach the camera and we see the condition of the car fade out. And that's a pretty vivid description of the shot as we see it in the film.
It is.
That's one where they very definitely had a wow boffo gag for the finish of the picture.
And wasn't it Benton Roberts that actually produced the car, or did the breakaway cars and all that kind of stuff?
He worked on them, and since I see Charlie Olsey in the crew there, and that's still Charlie Olsey assuredly worked on them. Benton Roberts got his little bit as the guy throwing the tomato as a reward for his work doing the breakaway cars, and I'm sure that an actual car in 1928, you could not just take the front wheels and pull them and yank them right off like that.
That's brilliant. That's so good.
I cannot imagine they were made. Having seen many cars of that vintage, they seem to have been magnificently sturdy. Gosh, if you see Model A's today, you just go, wow, those are, and they're huge, and the roads were narrower and the cars were bigger in those days.
Is there anything in the script, Randy, about, because I know, at the end when Stan and Babe are sitting in their car and the policeman said, "You stop there," and they're all chastised, and then you have this parade of kind of wacky races type cars going past them, and some of them you're thinking, well, what happened there? There's one that's suspended on a big tube or something, and I just wondered whether or not there was anything in the script to indicate what happened to those.
Here we go. Well, at one point, everybody is fighting, and it says here, paragraph number 51, the cop enters where Stan and Babe are arguing with the other tourists. By this time, the thing is at such a height that at any minute it may come to blows. The cop walks in with his hands on his hips and watches them, then reaches in his pocket, gets a whistle, and gives it a toot. The tourists all see the cop and scramble like mice, trying to get into their cars, people getting into the wrong cars, being pulled out, dashing hither and thither, etc. Stan and Babe turn and stand looking at the cop. The cop turns and yells title, "Who started this?" The tourists all point to Stan and Babe. The cop walks to Stan and Babe and gets over title, "You two guys wait here," and motions for the rest of the cars to move from the scene. They start moving slowly forward. And now paragraph number 53, move back to long shot, and between the camera and the cop, we see the different wrecks move slowly through the scene. The truck with the long pole on it has hooked up the limousine, and it is hanging from the pole. When that leaves, the small car covered with white paint, that's another gag that's not in the film, comes through. This is followed by a car turned completely upside down, being towed by another car. That's in the film.
Yes.
This is followed by people walking, carrying different parts of their cars. And there is the limousine where the floorboard is gone and the guy's walking the car.
Flintstones,
right?
Yeah.
Right. Yes, exactly. Or the Fred Flintstone model. This is followed by people walking, carrying different parts of their cars. The large truck enters scene and exits. exits. Follow it into setup where the cop has left his motorcycle. The truck hits the motorcycle, tipping it over and passing over it. Cut to the rear four wheels of the truck and show them pass over the motorcycle, crushing it flat. Back to Babe and Stan and the cop. The cop orders them to the car, and they exit. Arriving at the set where the roadster is, he orders Stan and Babe into it and speaks title, "You're under arrest. Follow me." He reaches down for his motorcycle and discovers that it has been smashed flat. This greatly angers him, and he throws the motorcycle to the ground, and et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So that was another story that Benton Roberts had about creating the squashed motorcycle. And I think he said they finally wound up using pieces of 4 different motorcycles, and they had to reconstruct a lot of it out of a very soft kind of metal because they couldn't squash the actual motorcycle. It was too they put it under a steamroller, and he said it almost upset the steamroller. So
they don't make them like they used to.
The Harley Davidson people or whoever made that motorcycle made a quality product back in 1928.
That's it. And was the motorcycle cop? He was an actual cop, wasn't he? As well, I seem to remember in your book.
He had been, I believe. He had been. Edgar Deering was his name, and he had been a patrolman, and decided to become a patrolman in the movies. Yeah. And did that through the late 40s. In fact, he does the same thing in The Big Noise.
Oh, right.
He accosts Laurel and Hardy in The Big Noise as a motorcycle cop in 1944. So he was still doing that through the late 40s, and then after that, he laid down his motorcycle and just did bit parts in westerns and other things in the last 10 years of his career or so. And conversely, I was just looking at Bacon Grabbers with Eddie Baker, who is the sheriff. He's got the Panama hat and the mustache at the beginning of the film. He's behind the desk. And he played a policeman or a detective so often that in 1936, he gave up his movie career to become a patrolman with the Los Angeles Highway Patrol, and did that for 20 years. And then in 1956, went back to acting and did that almost until he died in 1968. So there you have mirrored careers. You have Edgar Deering leaving the police force to become a movie cop, and Eddie Baker leaving the movies to become a real cop. Coincidence? I don't think so.
I also want to just pick up on Charlie Hall. A brilliant performance from Charlie Hall.
Yes.
It's probably his first notable appearance since Leave 'Em Laughing as the landlord.
He's in Leave 'Em Laughing as the landlord, and but yeah, it's really the first one of note that he has since then.
Yeah,
and well, he's the little menace, as Mr. Roach said they called him at the studio, and very good. And he gets his head tussled by Ruby Blaine, who Thomas Benton Roberts remembered as sometimes appearing as a lady wrestler.
Yeah.
And she did make 14 or 15 movies that we know of. She was a leading lady in B westerns, and she made a fair number of films from 1925 through 28. And then after that, she worked as a model. She was working as a model in New York in the early 40s. And she lived to a fairly ripe old age. So, but the last 3 films that she made were all Roach shorts. She made 2 Tars, and then she did 2 with Charlie Chase.
Right. Okay.
So after that, she pretty much got out of the movie business. So there you go.
Well, what's the matter with her anyway?
Oh, I don't know.
The lady who plays Edgar Kennedy's wife, who has a couple of shots where she's haranguing him for bumping back and forth. There's a couple of nice shots there where you see her, and she has that great close-up where Ruby Blaine takes the vacuum pump, the oil vacuum pump, which is full of dirty oil, and she sprays it, and it goes right into Grace Woods is her name.
Right.
And she has that wonderful close-up where she splutters in indignation after getting this supposedly dirty oil all over her. Well, Benton Roberts said that was chocolate syrup.
Oh, that's okay.
So it wasn't quite as bad as it looked. And she is the lady who yells, "Goodbye, goodbye," in Perfect Day.
Yeah.
And I made a special trip to USC to look at the 1929 Roach Studios payroll ledgers, because there were several things about 1929 films that I wanted to find, and that being key. I wanted to properly identify her, because the previous filmographies had said Clara Gill. And I said, I know that's not Clara Gill. She's the one who looks like Louise Brooks. She's the black-haired cigarette girl in Their Purple Moment. And that's not Our Lady in Perfect Day. And I got very lucky. There was a particular page in the payrolls that just gave the cast for Perfect Day. That almost never happens, but thank you. These little things happen for me, and I knew everybody in the film. I knew who they all were, except for there were two different women. And I said, well, it's one of these. So I went to Dave Lord Heath, and I said, it's either Grace Woods or this other lady who had an Italian name. And he said, well, I got a page for Grace Woods, and she was in a Will Rogers short earlier called The Cake Eater. Right. And he had a photograph of her. And I said, yep, that's who that is.
Brilliant.
Yep. So that's how we found out Grace Woods.
Great.
So she is the goodbye lady in Perfect Day, and she's also Edgar Kennedy's wife in Two Tars, who gets the oil sprayed at her by Ruby Blank.
Well, my favourite of those performances has got to be the Perfect Day one, because that goodbye is just wonderful. That is a perfect goodbye.
Well, if you ever go to Sons of the Desert conventions, at least in the States, anytime anybody leaves a room, we all do that.
I can imagine,
I'm looking forward to 4 days of that in Albuquerque coming up this August. So anybody leaving the room, goodbye. So, yes, you will hear that repeatedly.
Oh, fantastic.
I should mention also Thelma Hill, who is the little brunette in Two Tars. And I don't know if she did any other Roach films. This is the only one that she did with Laurel and Hardy. She made most of her films with Max Senich. When she was still a schoolgirl, she lived near the Senate lot, and she would just go there and hang around. And eventually they said, come on and be an extra. And so whenever her school schedule permitted, she would be in Senate films, and she graduated to some fairly prominent roles in them. There's a famous scene in a Ben Turpin film called The Prodigal Bridegroom, where Ben and Thelma Hill, who's wearing these oversized horn-rimmed glasses and has her hair sort of swept back, she looks kind of spinsterish. She and Ben are running along. He's got a little crown of flowers in his head, and they're running along idyllically, and they run past a blacksmith who appears to be hitting the head of a diminutive assistant, and then the assistant moves out of the way, and you see that there's a big spike that the blacksmith is hitting behind him. I think that's in Golden Age of Comedy. Anyway, it's a little bit of business that is frequently excerpted in anything that needs old silent comedies, right. And so that's Thelma Hill there in her. She's either usually a cute flapper, as she is in Two Tars, or she's the spinster character. Right. But she made quite a few films, but unfortunately, she was married to a man named John Sinclair, who was W.C. Fields' drinking buddy. And also he actually had saved Fields' life. When Fields was making one of his silent pictures with Chester Conklin, there was a scene when Fields was riding a bicycle and Chester Conklin was driving a truck in front of him, and Chester Conklin stopped unexpectedly, and Fields rammed the bicycle and fell and broke his neck. Oof. And John Sinclair held his neck in place till the ambulance could get there and prevented an early demise for Mr. Fields. Wow. So Fields replaced him, or repaid him rather, by always having him on the crew of whatever picture he was working on. Unfortunately, Mr. Fields and Mr. Sinclair both enjoyed the potent potables, and little Thelma, being this tiny thing, tried to match them, and unfortunately she became a chronic alcoholic. She died of a cerebral hemorrhage at 38. So yeah, only 10 years after Two Tars. So that's unfortunate, because she was a cute addition to Two Tars. Absolutely.
Yeah, they did very well. They took good.
Sorry that she had a sad fate there.
Yeah, it's so prevalent though in Hollywood, isn't it? At that time, the drink.
Yeah, Marvin Hatley said that. He said it wasn't drugs. He said it was alcohol was the great wrecker of careers in the movies. And as we were just talking about Emmett Flynn. With Early to Bed, there's another case of that happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
Marvin Hatley being more involved really with the Charlie Chase pictures than the Laurel and Hardys, at least in the early 30s. Many nights had to drive Charlie home to his place on Tiger Tail Road, because after the shooting day was over, there was always a party going on in Charlie Chase's dressing room. So, which is why he died at 46. Dear. Yeah, I stay away from the demon rum.
Wasn't Clyde Brookman as well? He had issues, didn't he? Cause, he had a terrible demise for him. I was just reading about him in the book.
There are many sad demises among the people who made these wonderful comedies. Yeah. So we try to focus on the happiness of their work rather than the frequent sadness of their private lives.
Quite right. Let's go back to Two Tars.
Yes.
And also, they were on the front cover of Motion Picture Times for Two Tars, which was quite a scoop for a two-reeler, wasn't it?
Well, Motion Picture Times. Yeah, it has some of the most colorful advertising copy I've ever read. Here it is.
Yeah,
they deserve this cover. And which is unusual for a short, because you would think they would have given it to, especially MGM. You would think they would have given it to one of their big budget features.
Yeah.
They're on Broadway now. The only two-reel comedy to play at a $2 house. You can imagine that's a lot of money for 1928 for a movie ticket.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Usually it was more like 30 cents. Wowing them indefinitely at the Embassy Theater in New York. Now get this. You'll spoil your suit laughing at Two Tars.
That's a bit crude.
They don't specify how, but I think we get the idea. The first of Hal Roach's laugh louder sensations for Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, 1928-29. And let's see, the release date on this is November 3rd. And in those days, the motion picture seasons were like television seasons are here in America, where they start in the fall and they continue through late spring. So here it's not as hard and fast now as it used to be, but it used to be that in September, the National Broadcasting Company would have NBC Week, and it was the week when all the new shows were making their debuts along with your old favorites returning, and they'd make a big deal. It's the new season. Summer repeats are over with. And so, like mid-September, it's NBC Week, and new shows would be there. And then usually in mid-January, after 13 weeks or so, if a show wasn't doing so well, that would be yanked and they put on a new replacement. And a lot of shows that were successful came in as mid-season replacements, and they'd go through the end of May, and that would be the end of the season. And for the summer, they'd rerun things. Well, they did the same thing for movies in those days, which is why the Academy Awards for the first few years are 1928-29, 1930-31. The Laurel and Hardy Academy Award for Music Box is Best Short Subject Comedy for 1931-32. And then right after that, they decided, let's make it for the calendar year rather than the release season, as it were, which makes more sense. So anyway, that's a little sidelight into the movie business of yore.
And the one lovely little thing that I turned up is about one of the gags where I'm not sure which the actor is, when he bursts the tire, slashes the tire.
And
the censors picked it up.
Sam Lufkin number 2.
Oh, was that Sam Lufkin? Oh, right. Okay.
Yes, it's with the bowler hat and the mustache.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you have the article there from the I think it's the New York State Censor. You have to remember that these films in those days had to pass state and county and city, all sorts of different censor boards. And goodness only knows how many times the objectionable footage was replaced into the print before it was sent on to the next theater in the chain who was supposed to run it. It's amazing that silent films exist at all, but I'm sure that there are many where what we have now is compromised because the available source material was cut because of censor board recommendations. But let's see if I can find it here. Oh, yeah. Yes, August 2nd, 1928, to Mr. W.D. Kelly. Now, this is from, I don't know who this is from. But anyway, I guess New York State, somebody in New York State.
Yeah.
Your picture, Two Tars, has been reviewed. The following elimination has been ordered. Reel 2, eliminate view where man deliberately cuts auto tire with a knife. The reason for the above elimination is that it will tend to incite crime. If you will write us a letter advising us that the above elimination will be made in all prints to be shown in New York State, it will not be necessary to return the print for rescreening. Well, that's still in every print I've ever seen of Two Tars.
Yeah.
And Richard Currier, the editor, also remembered that was controversial, that they thought it was going to show kids how to do that. Evidently, that was true of automobile tires in those days. The inner tube would expand and blow out if you did that. Yeah. Evidently, doesn't happen anymore. They don't have inner tubes anymore. But so it may have been done to release prints going to New York State, but evidently still survived in some negative material because, as I say, I think that's in A Golden Age of Comedy, which was released in 1958, because a goodly portion of Two Tars is excerpted in that film. And I first got my first print of Two Tars in 1968. I know that because I ran it for my 4th grade elementary school class when I was 9 years old. And then subsequently Black Hawk came out with a soundtrack version of it, and I have that. And every print I've ever had on Super 8 or DVD or what have you has that scene in it. So
well, there's probably listeners to the podcast in New York now who are thinking, what scene? What's this?
Yeah. Oh,
they've probably never seen.
It'd be nice if they still had some original 35 nitrate prints that had run in New York. We'd sure like to have. That's the sad thing about the silence, is that I don't know. I guess Serge Bromberg at Lobster Films is working on a Laurel and Hardy silence video project, and of course they will start going into the public domain before too long.
Yes. Yeah.
Where they're going to find prime 35 millimeter source material, I don't know, because back about 25, 30 years ago, a so-called preservationist was making video copies of them, but unfortunately he was storing the original nitrate in his hot garage, which is the worst thing you can do for nitrate film, and he turned a lot of this prime original source material into bricks, because when it gets too warm, it gets sticky and it sticks to itself, and there you go.
He who shall not be named.
No. It's also a lot of people have been keeping their films in airtight cans, which we're finding out is also a bad idea, because film needs oxygen, and if it doesn't have it around it, it will feed upon itself to get it, and that's what causes vinegar syndrome. And so safety film, which was thought to be impervious for 400 years, is sometimes turning out to not be as stable as nitrate film, because if you keep it in an airtight can, it will warp and buckle and shrink and become. That sadly has happened to the second reel of Battle of the Century, the 16 millimeter print that Robert Youngson made. Right. So thank goodness we caught that in 2015, and that protection copies were made right away, because now, as I understand it, that source is not usable anymore.
Oh, it's a shame. Yeah.
So
You are upset, aren't you?
Upset. I'm housebroken.
Not housebroken. He means heartbroken. Housebroken.
Can you just shed a little bit of light on this for me, Randy? When I'm reading in the trade papers, there's always a big mention made of when the Roach Studios or any studios have finished making whatever film. There's always a big announcement that it's arrived in New York. What's happening in New York? What's the big deal?
Well, they ship the negative and I think a fine grain master positive to New York, where they make the theatrical prints. They make the projection prints.
Right. Okay.
And they used to say that these prints were bicycled. Evidently, the distribution pattern. They had exchanges strategically placed around the country. There was Film Row in Chicago, and there was Fort Lee in New Jersey, and there were other places where they had distribution centers, the big studios did, and they would send a certain number of prints to each one of these, and they would service that region.
Right.
But evidently the prints were manufactured in New York.
Okay.
And they also had to be okayed by the executives, at least in MGM case, they had to be okayed by Arthur Lowe and Fred Quimby, who oversaw the short subject product. They had to be given screened and given the final okay for a release, that there was nothing objectionable. And so if you look in Craig Kallman's book of 100 Years of Brodies, his Hal Roach book, he quotes a number of the letters sent by Fred Quimby, or telegrams sent by Fred Quimby in New York to Roach, commenting on how a given film went over with the MGM executive board.
That's right.
Because, and funniest one ever, I think you should keep these two together as a team. There's that sort of
Leave
thing.
them laughing, I think it was. They really went down well with them. Yes, I remember that now. Yes. That's
so
right.
it's very interesting to see the pre-release reaction of the MGM executive board in New York. When Laurel and Hardy were returning from England in 1932, they went from the ship docked in New York, and while they were in New York City, they made a point of going to the Lowe's Incorporated offices and meeting with Fred Quimby, who again was at that point a New York-based executive overseeing all the short subject releases at MGM. So there's a couple of pictures of them with Fred Quimby and Felix E. Feist, who was another executive at Roach's.
Yeah.
And that's in the New York office. Fred Quimby subsequently came out here to the Culver City plant and oversaw the cartoon product. And that's why his name gets a special all by itself title card produced by Fred Quimby on all of the Tex Avery cartoons, and I think the Tom and Jerry's as well of the 1940s. And a lot of people used to say, boy, that Fred Quimby, he sure made a lot of good cartoons.
That's right.
I'd say, no, he didn't make them. In fact, he practically did everything he could to prevent Tex Avery from making good cartoons, and Avery had to do everything he could to sneak around Quimby to get what he wanted on film. So,
so what did Quimby actually do for the Tom and Jerry's? What was his? Why was he on there?
Probably set release schedules. Probably talked with the exhibitors. Was a liaison between the studio and the people who were actually running the films and that sort of thing. Set budgets, set schedules. That sort of thing that has to be done on a cartoon. And then every once in a while, there's a cartoon where they're showing you scenes from previous cartoons. And usually if you look at the one made just before or just after that one, it's a particularly lavish cartoon. So you say, well, that was a budget buster. So they had to make up for it by doing a cheapy one where they say, we're looking through our scrapbook. Hey, remember the time when we did this? And then they go to 3 minutes from an old cartoon. They're only giving you 1 minute of new footage in this cartoon.
Yeah.
So that happens once in a while.
Yeah, you see that in sitcoms as well, don't you?
So Quimby was the guy who put together the schedule and managed the money and the budgets and who was working on what,
Okay.
So he did do something, but Tex Avery always described him as being very humorless, and I don't think he was humorless, but because he seems to be a congenial guy who understands the comedy in the telegrams. And when he came out here once in 1934 and had a fishing expedition with Stan Laurel in Catalina. And he seems to be a smiling, happy guy. So I don't think he was quite the ogre that Tex Avery encountered.
Right. But he was quite an influential character for Roach, of course, because didn't he start at Pathé? He did the same liaison kind of role in Pathé, didn't he?
He was, yes. And that was out here, and then he worked at Roach's for a time, at Culver City. But then he went to the executive board in New York, and for most of the time that Laurel and Hardy were at Roach's, he was in New York before he got the job at MGM with the cartoons in Culver City.
Right. Okay.
So an interesting guy, Fred Quimby.
Yeah, an important character. Yeah, I remember those stills when in 32, as you were saying, Stan and Babe go to the offices and they sort of leaning against the desk.
Yeah, and on the wall there's a picture of Irving Thalberg with Irving Jr., infant Irving Jr. So there's the boss. Yeah, Roach had made the deal with Marcus Lowe in the summer of 1927, and Marcus Lowe died right after that, and so it was his son Arthur Lowe that Roach dealt with mostly. And Roach made a lot of trips to New York. Every year he had to go to New York and sort of lay out his projected program, and he had very few dealings with anybody at MGM in Culver City. Although he was friends with Thalberg and Norma Shearer, but did not really do a lot. And didn't need to. I always got irritated when I would read in later years, when I would reread William K. Everson's book, because he would always assume that any time the sets were particularly good in a Laurel and Hardy film, they were undoubtedly borrowed from MGM. Well, no, they weren't. They had their own prop department. They had their own scenery dock. They had their own lumber mill at Roach's. Those early shots and busybodies are on the Roach lot at their lumber mill, where they're making the sets and the props.
Right, yes, of course.
That's really, honest to God, Hal Roach property there. So they didn't need to borrow anything from MGM. So
makes me wonder if you think, because obviously MGM is sort of on the doorstep of the Roach Studios.
Yeah, they're a mile away.
So Roach is probably thinking, I'm not going to have too much to do with these guys, because they're going to, they could literally be over his shoulder, couldn't they? Live watching him. So keep them at arm's length. Stick with New York.
Yeah, well, he did go to New York for funding for each year's program. It was seems to be half MGM and half the Bank of America. Putting up the money for each year's program. And of course, after he no longer had the distribution deal with MGM, they look a lot cheaper. Saps at Sea looks like a low budget movie. Whereas even Blockheads, which is the last one released through MGM, still looks pretty polished. I suppose it probably did qualify as a B feature, being only 56 minutes, but it still has, MGM wanted that same MGM polish on everything, even if it was a B picture. So,
and just sort of talking about the production of the films. This is the last film now before we move into synchronized sound, isn't it? I'm sure. I was reading Ben Shipman went across to New York, funnily enough, to really investigate the sound technology.
Oh yeah. Habeas corpus is, well, I know Courier went to New York.
Oh, did he?
He told me all about that.
Okay, that's interesting.
He went to New York to oversee the recording of those synchronized tracks. And in fact, I've got a reproduction of a trade paper ad that MGM placed around that time. And they said, we have Laurel and Hardy in silent, synchronized, and sound. So silent would have been something like Double Whoopee or Big Business, which did not come with a track.
Right.
Synchronized would have been Habeas Corpus, We Fall Down, Liberty, That's My Wife, Bacon Grabbers, and Angora Love. I think those are the six that have. The first four have orchestral scores, and the last two have organ scores.
Right.
The orchestral scores, I think Joseph Pasternak, who was a renowned classical musician, worked on some of those, and Rosario Bouton worked on some of them, and Nat Shilkret, who later gets a credit for music on Bohemian Girl, did some of them also. And I've actually got the names of all the different musical cues that were used, and I have the recording dates and the hours and locations where those synchronized tracks were done. And in some cases, at least in one case, I have the names of all the musicians too. So, but those were all done in Camden, New Jersey, where the Victor Talking Machine Company had their headquarters. And Victor, Elmer Regis was an executive with the Victor Record Company, and in fact, he is responsible for the innovation of electrical recording. He developed that, so that's what turned making records from speaking into a big horn, an acoustical horn, from into electrical with microphones. He oversaw the invention and introduction of all of that. I used to know a wonderful musician named Arnold Brilhart, who was an alto saxophonist and clarinetist, and he was a very, very busy New York studio musician, making records and appearing in the pit orchestras of Broadway shows and doing radio shows in New York all through the 20s and 30s. And he made his first records in 1922 and continued doing that all through into the early 40s. And I said, well, what was the difference between making records acoustically and making them electrically? And he said, you got to remember, the guy who's the recording engineer is there in the studio. He's right there on the floor with you. And he's got this big cutting lathe that's cutting into the big beeswax master. It looks like a big, thick record, but it's made out of beeswax. And you once you've got the groove cut by the cutting lathe into the beeswax, they spray that with something which hardens. And then from that, they make the stamper that stamps the record. Like a big waffle iron. So anyway, he says, there were certain notes that I knew not to play on my saxophone because we called those wolf tones, because there was some sort of thing with the harmonic resonance that would cause the horn to shake if you played that particular tone. And so I having had one bad experience about that, where the recording engineer, looked daggers at me and we had to shave off the beeswax and start all over again. He said, I learned to pivot my saxophone away anytime I had to play one of those notes. So he said, you didn't have to worry about that once you got microphones in there. So, so anyway, Regis was there when they made these tracks, and he then subsequently moved out to Culver City. And speaking of bacon grabbers, that's Elmer Regis's house that they were using for Edgar Kennedy's house.
Yeah,
it had just been finished being built. It's on Bannockburn Drive in Cheviot Hills, and Regis was renting it, and his family had not yet come out from Camden, New Jersey. So because the house was not yet fully moved in, that's why they were able to use it for bacon grabbers, and especially for that one shot taken inside the house on the second story where they're shooting through the window.
Yeah.
You see, you're over the shoulder with Kennedy's got the shotgun, and you see Stan on the ladder through the window, and that's shot from inside the house. So they were able to do that because Mrs. Regis and Elmer Jr. were not there yet. They were en route from Camden at the time of the making of the film. So anyway, yes, those tracks were made in Camden with a full orchestra. And I remember Currier said there was one scene where he wanted to do a sound effect, which was a lot of rocks falling. And you had to be very careful because there was something in the recording device called a sound valve, and it was very fragile. And if you did anything too loud, an impulse noise like a gunshot, it would break.
Right.
And fortunately, it only cost about 20 cents, but it was a nuisance to have to replace it. And Currier says, I had this box full of rocks, and I gave this damn box a hell of a shove, and bumpity bump bump bump, you really heard them damn rocks. And so we had to do a retake because it was too late. Broke the light valve, it was called the light valve. So Currier had vivid memories of doing those music and effects tracks.
Yes.
And actually, the first human voice you hear in a Laurel and Hardy film is on the music track for We Fall Down.
Yeah.
You hear two people. I've got them identified in the book. I forget their names right now, but they do the laughing during the party sequence, as it were. So yeah, the Two Tars is the last one. It would have been interesting to hear what kind of a track they would have given that one. What kind of sound effects they would have. Probably a lot of car horns honking, I would imagine, at various points.
Yeah, a lot of scraping.
You do hear that at various points in Liberty when they have the shot going down looking at traffic. They put in a sound effect of ooga ooga horns, and streetcar bells clanging and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So you probably would have heard something similar to that in Two Tars. And they probably would have used tunes like Sailing, Sailing Over the Bounding Main and Columbia, the Gem of the Ocean and things like that. They like to use tunes that were familiar to the audiences of the time that would have had some key to the action going on.
Yes, I noticed the titles were quite appropriate, weren't they, for the sort of scenes they were representing. I've seen that in your book, actually, some of those titles of the tracks.
Yeah. Well, yes, it's too bad that more people. You see, I get it because I'm well conversant with music of that period because I do my radio show and I play records of that period all the time, so I recognize the tunes. So, for example, in We Fall Down, there's part where they use "Cheatin' on Me," as one of the background tunes. Most people won't recognize that, and it's too bad because they usually do make sort of witty commentaries on the action, but with the choice of the tunes that they're using. But they can read those in my book and acquaint themselves with those. I put them all in order as they appear in the movie, so you can just follow right along and figure out every time there's a new tune. Just look in the listing of the music cues, and you'll know what they're playing.
Yes, yeah. I'd love to know with the music piece of music that I'd love to know what it is. That's My Wife when they're on the dance floor, and Ollie's shaking him around, and I just love that piece of music.
That's called the Wobbly Walk, and that has a tie to Anita Garvin.
Okay,
let me tell you.
Tell away.
I do write a lot about music, and I have done thus far 3 very lengthy and very well researched, because it took me a long time to do them, booklet notes on a dance band of the 1920s called Irving Aronson and His Commanders. Now, one of the key people in that band was Clifford Red Stanley, who was a trombonist and singer and a comedian and eccentric dancer. And an eccentric dancer, if you've seen the movie King of Jazz, the Paul Whiteman film, there's a guy named Al Rubberlegs Norman, and he shows up in about 5 or 6 movies, all in 1930, where he does his essentially 1.5-minute act. And it's the most amazing. He's a rubberlegs dancer, an eccentric dancer. It's not really tap dancing. It's just very unusual looking dancing.
Right.
And you will see him in King of Jazz, which is readily available now and has been restored. He's in another film starring the Abe Lyman Orchestra, a Western called Pardon My Gun. And he does the same bit he's in Paramount on Parade, also made in 1930. He seems to have made the rounds of all the movie studios. Well, it's that type of dancing that Red Stanley also did. And there was a tune, I forget the names of the 2 songwriters, but they wrote that tune, Wobbly Walk, for Red Stanley to be used by the Irving Aronson Band in their floor show, which they would do in nightclubs, and where Clifford Red Stanley, later married to Anita Garvin, would demonstrate this eccentric dancing of his. Well, unfortunately, the Waring's Pennsylvanian hot dance band, which they were before they became a big vocal chorale, they made the commercial record of Wobbly Walk for Victor. That was the label that Aronson was also under contract to, but Victor had a policy where they would only allow one dance band under contract to make a record of a given tune. They would do a vocal version by a singer, they would do a pipe organ version by Jesse Crawford, and then they would do a band version by George Olson or Ted Weems or Waring's Pennsylvanians or Irving Aronson's Commanders, one of the hot dance bands that they had under contract. So even though it was written for Aronson and written specifically for Red Stanley, later married to Anita Garvin, she told me this whole story. They didn't get to record it. However, by divine providence, when we were doing the 2nd volume of the Irving Aronson Complete CD, we were bemoaning the fact that we did not have the soundtrack disc to the 2nd of 2 short films that he made in 1929 for MGM. They were Metrotone shorts. We had found the first disc, but we didn't have the second one. And I'm pretty sure it's the late, great Ron Hutchinson who found the soundtrack disc for us, which does have the Aronson Band performing that tune, Wobbly Walk. And it's just about the hottest thing they ever recorded. So we're very, very grateful that survived and got to us. There are no coincidences. Thank you very much, everybody up there. I swear these things happen for a reason. Because we were kind of delayed in getting the 2nd volume out. Well, it turns out that there was a good reason for getting it, because that's when we got the disc. So now we really do have everything that he is known to have recorded during that period. We don't have any omissions. And if you want to hear a really hot version of Wobbly Walk, it's Rivermont Records. And in fact, that's the name of the CD, Wobbly Walk by Irving Aronson and his Commanders. Oh. And it's a very good arrangement used in That's My Wife.
Yeah.
It's a really, really nice arrangement of it. Oh, but the Waring's Pennsylvanians record is very nice too. And I'm sure if you just go onto YouTube, somebody has posted the Waring's Pennsylvanians record.
Oh, brilliant.
That came out on an LP back in the 60s, so it's been around for a while.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'll take a look.
Yeah, but that's it. Wobbly Walk.
No, I know.
That's the one. They do use some other tunes, but that's the main one.
That's the one. No, that is definitely the one.
They use it at the end of Liberty too, because they're rather wobbly on their legs as they're getting toward the elevator.
Yes.
Stan is doing all of that vaudeville stuff with the legs.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. Love it. And so just going back to, we should get us back to Tutors. That's what we're here for. I keep taking you off on tangents. Looking at all the reviews in the trade papers, it was received very, very well. And even today, well, I say today, the sort of the commentators from McCabe, Everson, just about everybody loves Tutors, and saying that it's one of the best Laurel and Hardy films, not just silent films, but one of the best.
Yeah.
How does it sit with you generally, Randy?
Oh, it's very well constructed, and even though it's basically, after the drugstore bit, it's basically one long sequence that runs almost for 2 reels of 2 tars. It's paced well, and there's enough variety in the different humiliations imposed on the other drivers, so that it doesn't become tiresome.
Yeah.
So it certainly made an impression on me, because I remember having seen the golden age of comedy. I think I was in first grade drawing pictures from it from memory.
Great.
In my first grade class. So I also remember particularly being taken with the close-up of Stan when the tomato hits him on the back of the neck. And the way that he plays that to the camera.
Yeah.
We always think of only Ollie doing the camera looks, but in the silent years particularly, there are many times when Stan plays right to us directly.
Definitely.
And in fact, there was a moment of that in Early to Bed, when at the very beginning, when he's savoring the cake, the birthday cake that he's made for Ollie.
That's right.
That's played right to the camera.
Yeah.
And I think it's that direct engagement with the audience that is something that distinguishes Laurel and Hardy, and makes us more empathetic toward them, because they acknowledge us all the time. And particularly Ollie, it's as if we are the only people who understand him and know what he's going through, because Stan is often the cause of his problems, and certainly the wives don't understand him. So he looks to us for some sort of emotional support, and I've always liked comedians who are the underdog. That's why much as I admire his skill as a filmmaker, I could never really get into Harold Lloyd, because Harold Lloyd was a go-getter who got what he wanted. So why does he need me? Laurel and Hardy need me because they're struggling.
Yeah, that's right.
They're trying to do their best, and sometimes they have a little business that's making money, but it always falls apart by the end of the film. There's actually a letter in Bernie Hojay's Letters from Stan website, where Stan says, I always wanted a sort of unhappy ending for them. He said, I thought it preserved their integrity. And you'll notice, even when it looks like they're about to have a happy ending, like pack up your troubles, boys, you're, as long as you're with me, why, no more troubles. And then Pierre, the chef, comes out from, well, if it ain't the snitchers, and I got my knife, and there goes the happy ending,
That's it.
So that way they're struggling once again when we come to the next film. So that's I always preferred Laurel and Hardy, or the other comedians who were the little guys trying to get along in life. I think we do relate to them a little bit more than the guy who's always successful.
That is very true, very true. But as you say, I think, those camera looks, they really do engage the audience and make you feel as if you're with them alongside them. Absolutely right. And I don't think Stan gets enough credit for his camera looks, because they are quite plentiful, especially as you say in the silent period. I think it's just that Stan's are very fleeting. They're always very fleeting, whereas Ollie's are much more. They focus on it, and he's communicating.
Well, that is one thing that was sort of the house style at the Roach lot, was to make sure you got lots of reaction shots. And he says, because it's not really the gag that's funny, it's the reaction to the gag that's funny. And 9 times out of 10, the reaction of the comedian would be yours in the audience if that had happened to you. And that makes you empathetic toward whoever the person is in the movie. And that was sort of the house style. And the other thing was, most of the time, the comedy was of anticipation and not of surprise. So the idea was, let the audience in on the gag before you let the characters in on it. And if you listen to the little interview excerpt with Richard Currier, that's either on the CD that came with the book, or now it's on the Blu-ray and DVD of the definitive restorations. It's also on that. Richard Currier talks about that, and he gives a couple of examples of how we would always plant the gag for the audience to see before we let the characters in on it, because then they could savor it. It's a reversal, or it's the same thing really, of what Hitchcock always described. He said, you could have a scene where people are in a business meeting and all of a sudden a bomb explodes. And he said, you'd have 5 seconds of shock. He said, but what I would do would be, you see somebody come in and plant the bomb under the table, and then he leaves, and then the people come in for their business meeting and they're chatting about different pleasantries, and you cut back to that bomb, you know that it's under there, and so you know all the time what their fate is going to be, and that is suspenseful. And so it's the anticipation that made it suspenseful. Well, in the case of the Hal Roach pictures, it's the anticipation that builds up the laugh before the laugh.
Yeah, definitely. Funnily enough, it's quite spooky. I had a very similar conversation, believe it or not, with my two boys this morning. They're off school, first day off school today for the Easter holidays, and I'm trying to keep them quiet because I'm trying to do a bit of work. So I said, well, why didn't you watch a film? What would you like to watch? Do you want me to put Disney Plus on? And you know what they asked for? Laurel and Hardy. I mean, good. Proud dad. Got to say, proud dad.
Absolutely.
So they plant themselves in front of. And again, this will go back to the definitive restorations. I went onto YouTube because it was quicker, and I put on Toad in a Hole because that's what they wanted to watch. Toad in a Hole, and the quality was just shocking on the YouTube. So I thought, right, hang on, I'm going to get the Blu-ray out. So I got the quality is such a good, pristine. Copy, and they were just howling, and they loved it. And we were talking about the reaction shots, and they were looking at Ollie's face, and they were looking at Stan's face, and when Ollie gets the paint on his face, and Stan's peeping at him through the little cracks, and they were just howling. Absolutely loved it. So I left them with that for a good 20 minutes.
Good. Well, I hope they bring their friends over and watch and indoctrinate them.
Definitely,
to Laurel and Hardy.
Definitely.
But that was the thing. You don't just. At Sennett, Max Sennett was more fast-paced gags for gag's sake, and there was not a lot of thought given to the characterization. A lot of times Billy Bevan or Andy Clyde were sort of interchangeable, But at Roach's, it was the comedy of situation and personality, and it was done more slowly and more methodically, and the idea was reactions are of paramount importance. You do the gag and you get the reaction of the person to whom it happened, and usually Ollie, and he looks up, and then Stan looks and he's got his reaction because he's sorry for having accidentally done what he did, and then you cut back to Ollie for another reaction. So you're getting basically 4 laughs out of any gag because you've got 3 reaction shots that follow it.
That's it.
And that's the type of thing that's missing in the Fox pictures.
Yeah.
If you think about it, that's really of anything, that's the key thing that's missing is Ollie's camera looks and the reactions after a given gag happens. If they had been more careful about that, those pictures would be better than they are.
Yeah, I suppose if you took out all the reaction shots out of all the Roach comedies, how many laughs would you miss? They'd be, it's just right, isn't it?
Yeah,
definitely. Brilliant. Randy, have you got anything else on Two Tars? Because my notes are dry now. I've covered everything I was going to talk about.
You've done it. Well, let me see if I said anything. I told you about the motorcycle and everything else. Well, I think that's probably it. Although, as I say, I am working on Volume 2 of the Laurel and Hardy movie scripts, and this is good timing because I have been working on Two Tars just the past couple of days. And so there will be more biographical information in there about the people on either side of the camera in my notes that preface the actual script. And it's always fascinating to read the way that the writers at the Hal Roach Studios conveyed in text, in prose, comedy that was purely visual. They've got to employ a lot of adjectives, and they have to be very precise about what they're describing. And sometimes their descriptions make you think, oh yeah, that's what happens in the film. I forgot about that, So it's also, like I say, it's always interesting to see what's only in the script. And for example, in the drugstore sequence, there's no mention of Stan slipping on all the gumballs. And you realize, they didn't think about that when sitting alone at the typewriter, that's what would happen when you have all those little hard, because they're hard little gumballs. They're not gummy, they're hard. And they used to call them jawbreakers. When I was a kid, you'd get certain large ones. They were called jawbreakers.
Gobstoppers. We had gobstoppers in the
Okay. Well, obviously, when they had those, they probably did start slipping, and they said, hey, let's use that. Yeah. And so you see Stan, fortunately, he's still pretty young when they made this one. He's, he's 30, just turned 38. at the point they made this one, because it's late June when they shot this. So Stan had just turned 38, and so he's still pretty agile, and he's doing all those falls back and forth, boom, 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 boom. And so that clearly had to be something inspired by the actual props themselves, which of course did suggest bits of business that you wouldn't have foreseen had you just been sitting there at the typewriter. But so you find things like that, and that's what I try to illuminate in my notes prior to the scripts. I don't just want to put the scripts out there with no explanation. They need some setup. Here's how they differ. Here's what they used. Here's what they didn't use. In some cases, like the script for Any Old Port, that's wildly different from the film, and actually better than the film. When I have dibs on that one when we get to that point. That's probably another couple of years down the road.
Yeah,
probably.
That's right.
But anyway, yeah. So I'm working on that. I definitely want that out by August so that it's ready for the big convention.
Oh, great.
But
okay.
even people who aren't going to the convention will be able to get it. So
yeah.
So look for it. I'm working very hard to get it finished in the next couple of weeks.
That's fantastic.
And get it off to my publisher.
That's brilliant. And just going back on what you said there, anybody that's got your big Magic Behind the Movies book, there is in the scripts book. It's definitely worth getting that, because you have got new stills in there. You've got new behind the scenes production stuff. It's really well worth adding to the collection without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, well, I have lots and lots of graphic material, and so we'll try to put something for every film that's not in the prior book.
Yeah.
Especially if I can find anything that's behind the scenes, I don't know, but we'll look for it, and whatever we find that is of interest, we will use. That's unique to this book.
Well, we're certainly looking forward to it. So let us know as soon as you've got a release date, and we can spread it far and wide. And let's get
all right. Very good.
Yeah, definitely. Randy, thank you so much for joining me again. It's been wonderful as always to chat with you over these fabulous films, and they just get better and better now. These films, and I'm really excited because obviously we've got the synchronized films coming up now, and we are gradually making our way to the talkies. So it's getting nice and tasty now. So thank you so much.
Call me for anything you want me to blab about, because I usually have a story or two about whatever film it may be.
I certainly will.
I'm happy to do as many of these as you want me to do. So I enjoy doing them, and I hope people enjoy listening to them.
Always. Bless you, Randy. Thank you so much.
All right.
Wonderful.
Bless you too. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. All the best to you.
Very good.
Take care.
Take care.
See you now.
Bye-bye.
He's a great guy, ain't he?
He certainly is. I like him.
So there we are. I hope you enjoyed our discussion today about Two Tars. Do get in touch if there's anything you'd like to add or ask about anything we've spoken about today. On the next programme, our film up for discussion is the boys' first film with synchronised music and effects, Habeas Corpus, a film that doesn't get mentioned all that much on social media. So if this is a personal favourite of yours, then why not get in touch and tell me what you love about it, or conversely, tell me why you think it stinks. And who knows, you might just make it onto the show. As usual, you can send all your voice messages and emails to laurelandhardyblog@gmail.com. That's Laurel and A-N-D hardyblog@gmail.com. Don't forget, you can receive my free newsletter by visiting blogheads.com, and that way you can stay up to date with everything related to the release of my upcoming book, Laurel and Hardy Silence, all the podcast news and any blog publications that are due. So all that's left to say is thank you to my guest, Randy Skretvedt. Thanks to the Bohunks Orchestra for the fabulous music. Thank you to all the authors and journalists, past and present, whose work is invaluable to me when researching my essays. And last but never least, thank you for joining me throughout year 2 of the Laurel and Hardy blogcast. I've thoroughly enjoyed putting these episodes together, and I thank you for choosing to spend this time with me. So until we meet again in episode 23, it's goodbye from him.
Goodbye.
Goodbye from him.
Goodbye.
And it's a very goodbye from me. Goodbye.
Bye.